Like a washing machine, MSM has what's called a spin cycle. Don't get caught in the spin cycle. Uh, because this is all going to lead to us being invaded. I hope you all understand that, right? I mean, when a nation commits between 1/15th and 1/30th of their 3.2 million man forces, and I'm including reserves in that because reserves have been mobilized. Um, that is called a small force. And when you send only about 80,000 of those guys in on the ground, that's an even smaller force from a small force. People are buying the spin. Uh, and watching that situation over there, and by the way, this goes with my last video. If y'all are wondering why I'm even giving this any attention, I just wanted to add this commentary to my last commentary on this situation. If you've ever watched a cat play with a mouse before it bites the mouse's head off, that's what this is. And you know what I'm talking about. Uh, if you don't know what I'm talking about, watch the video before this one. This is like watching a cat play with a mouse before ripping its damn head off and swallowing it whole. Um, because a nation with the world's biggest strategic bomber fleet, and it's also the biggest air force in Europe, mind you. 1,000 fighters and tactical fighter bombers. 571 strategic bombers. That's 1,571 combat aircrafts. So you mean to tell me that on the first day, missiles didn't fly out of Russia, cruise and some ballistic missiles with conventional payloads and other surface-to-surface systems didn't launch out of Russia. They didn't hit and totally annihilate the air defenses in their next-door neighbor's land. Um, they didn't send in their Spetsnaz, which is some of the most best trained elite special forces on the planet, on the earth. I'm sorry. Um, and they didn't have more than just a little bit of Trojans, which they're using for a beta test in this limited, limited incursion. They didn't use more than just a handful of them, which, you know, the ones Zelensky called saboteurs that were out there causing trouble, havoc in the hinterlands that he's been griping about. They didn't beta test just more than a little bit of them. You mean they didn't like do a full on invasion? You mean they didn't uh, take Ukraine down on day one with the biggest rocket and howitzer artillery forces on the world? Uh, the biggest active tank fleet, and China's equal to them if you take what they have in storage, which easily can be brought out and refurbished, but that's beside the point. With the most artillery pieces of any nation, with the biggest strategic bomber fleet, with more fighters and tactical bombers than anybody in Europe. China outnumbers everybody in those. China has the biggest combat air forces due to the number of their fighters and fighter bombers. But they have the second biggest strategic. But Russia has the biggest strategic and probably like the second biggest fighter fleet. In addition to ours, you know, we're about the same with Russia and that in those numbers. But you mean to tell me that the most powerful air forces in Europe didn't smash that place? They didn't fly wave after wave of bombers in after Ukraine's air defenses were totally annihilated by missiles coming out of Russia. They didn't fly in wave after wave of bombers after that and totally saturate that land and bomb it to dust. Uh, Accompanied by fighters and then tactical fighter bombers to do ground strikes and air patrols. You mean to tell me that that didn't happen? You mean to tell me that the biggest artillery force in shell and rocket that place into oblivion, clearing paths for their armor and infantry, mech infantry, to come in next? You mean to tell me the biggest airborne corps on the planet, they have more airborne troops than any other nation that are in that role. You know, that could be airdropped out of planes and parachutes. They have the biggest airborne forces in the world, the biggest airborne corps. They didn't drop them all into Ukraine to seize bridges, infrastructure, and installations? You mean to tell me Ukraine's still fighting? Well, how could they still be fighting if it's a full-scale invasion? If it's a full-scale invasion, then Russia did all the things I just said, right? Come on, guys. Come on now. Come on, man. You're all pulling my leg. You know, none of this makes any sense. You know, if you look at the numbers and capabilities, as I so carefully listed in my last video, you'll see how much bullshit this entire thing is. And it's a distraction and a trap, a dangerous trap for the West. It's to bait us in because Russia is holding a lot of firepower back. Because I think a lot of it is here inside our borders with the vast number of CHICOM troops and paramilitary that are here too. And China's forces are immensely bigger than anybody else's, you know, other than their bombers. But their forces outnumber everybody. They have as many tanks as Russia. They have more APCs and IFVs than Russia, quite a bit more. Their artillery is close to Russia's, but they're a close second after Russia in artillery. But they have way more ground troops. So I think all that stuff is here, and I think I've been right, and I think I've been probably the most accurate person in terms of giving you the truth about what is happening militarily around the world. And when these other theaters open up, guess what? I'll be right about that too. And they're all going to draw us in, destroy us, because our tiny little puny woke military is going to get divided even smaller into tinier parcels and sent around the world. And it's not going to be a good ending for us. So, that is why this is all just a bunch of BS. May Yeshua bless and keep you all always.